Hi, everyone. You're listening to Bug Talk, a podcast created by members of the entomology department at Michigan State University. My name is Sophia, and I'm here with two lovely ladies, Ariana. Hi, Ariana.
Hi.
She's our co-host in Bug Talk. And our guest today is Jackie. Hi, Jackie.
Hello.
Today is kind of a special episode where we wanted to chat about a topic that's important to many of us in the department that have field work coming up for the field season or the summer. And Jackie has been instrumental in developing a document in the department to help us guide the preparations for field work. And we wanted to invite her to chat a little bit more about what's involved in the document and how it came to be, what are the changes compared to previous years. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jackie first of all. Jackie, could you introduce yourself a little bit to our audience?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Jackie Perkins. I am a research technician and lab manager in the berry crop entomology lab, which is run by Rufus Isaacs. So I'm responsible for a lot of the day-to-day management of lab and research activities, as well as involved in running certain projects in the lab that have to do with integrated pest management for berry crops. And I also help with a lot of pollination research for blueberry.
And you have been in this position since when?
So I started after I finished my master's. I started this job in September 2018.
Okay.
So this will be my third field season with the job.
So let's talk first about field guides in general. I think many of us that are doing field work in the department may have had some sort of a field guide in the past. For example, in my lab, we have every incoming undergraduate or seasonal employee gets trained by either myself or a lab technician on how to prepare for field work. A lot of the seasonal employees that we hire have maybe not had the opportunity to work outside. And so there are some like ground rules that we have to let them know about that are important, things such as clothing. So I always ask employees to not wear shorts. If you're working in a pesticide treated field, for example, that's not acceptable. So you have to wear long pants regardless of the fact that it's sometimes really hot outside. You can't wear sandals. That's another point of contention sometimes. And then just talking about things like taking food and water with you or sunscreen or those kinds of things. And those have been like pretty much a standard part of the training and part of our field guide. Is that how you have been trained, or have you seen any differences there?
Yeah, so you hit most of the major things that we focused on. So a big thing when I first hire a student, and like you said, a lot of the students that we have come on are new to field work or it's their first research experience with this kind of job. So a lot of times we give them recommendations for what to wear or requirements for what to wear. So you already mentioned long pants and closed-toed shoes. And we also typically suggest that you have like rain gear or layers because everyone knows Michigan weather can be challenging and unpredictable. So, a lot of that has been just given as like recommendations. We always tell them to bring sunscreen and their own water bottle, a hat if they prefer that for sun protection too, and having snacks or any medication and such, because we're typically far away from the field site far away from campus when we're at the field site, or we don't always have access to get to food or water quickly when we need it. So a lot of that has been somewhat informal prior to me making this document, where it was emailed recommendations. And then on the first day, we'd have kind of like a lab welcome where we'd go through some slides of what to expect for a typical field day. The most formal training, it has been just the WPS, or the Worker Protection Standard, which is the chemical safety for people that are working on farms or pesticide treated areas. So because I'm a certified pesticide applicator, I would typically do that training, and that's that's very formal and like federal regulatory. But for the most part, before I made this new document, it was the other training was pretty informal and pretty much like just introduction to the lab, what they should bring every day.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about the gear, the field gear, because I think that there's like this gray area, and Ariana, feel free to chime in how you guys do it in your lab. But I feel like there's this gray area of what's provided by your job and what is considered like things that you should bring yourself. And some of these, just to give you an example, are you brought up the rain gear, and then also rain boots. And so in my lab, we have a huge collection of boots and rain gear that people can have access to, that if they don't bring their own, or if they don't want to buy their own, if they don't have the ability to do that, they have access to that kind of protective gear. What's your approach to that in your lab?
Yeah, so we also have a giant stockpile of rain boots at the entomology farm, and those are really important for spring in a blueberry field because if you've ever been there, they're pretty mucky and there's a lot of standing water in the springtime. So we do offer those to students. We typically have some rain gear available as well, like raincoats. Now these are like giant ponchos that kind of are meant to fit anybody who might need them, but we do have some available. Knowing the students, I think most of the time they prefer to have their own rain gear, but we definitely like to make it available for anybody that might have trouble getting it or doesn't have it right away. Shorts is definitely one that we get some pushback on. People want to wear shorts when it's hot, but is not acceptable. So I usually recommend, or I've sent like recommendations to students for like cheaper options that I think are comfortable. So sometimes I'll email some links if they're really lost on what to get. But
Uh-huh. And then the other area, I guess, that I have seen a shift on over the years that I've been here is like what to put in the field vehicles. I feel like that package is getting larger and larger and larger every year because we think of other things to add to that. You know, it used to be just a little first aid kit, and now it's like a huge Ziploc bag of stuff. So
yeah.
let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that's funny that you say it's gotten bigger because now ours, when I first started this job, it was a bucket. And now it's like a massive tote in each one of our vehicles. And we have a lot of items in ours that are not technically needed, but are more like comfort items. So we do include Gatorade in ours now. So that's something that we didn't used to have, but we've had students like
So
struggle.
is that Gatorade powder and then you also include water, or it's just a bottle of Gatorade?
So it actually happened because we had a lab picnic and we had a ton of leftover Gatorade. And so we had bottles of Gatorade. And this is how this first started. But powder's not a bad idea because it takes up less room. But then, of course, you need to make sure you have water. But we typically also have that. But yeah, we had a lab picnic and someone brought like cases of Gatorade. They didn't get drunk. And then we ended up throwing them in the trucks and said, this is great if people have heat exhaustion or whatever, so they didn't go to waste, and now they're in the truck in our safety totes. But we also usually provide sunscreen and bug spray, which again are more like comfort items, but they're things that can make a huge difference for field productivity and safety. I mean, you don't want to get sun poisoning or anything like that, or bit by mosquitoes or ticks. So yeah, and then ours also our totes also contain the like required items for if you're in a pesticide treated area. So obviously we don't go in areas that are currently restricted because they had just received pesticide, but we are working on farms. So even if it's safe to enter the farm, there is always risks associated with that. So you have to have a gallon of water for each person. So typically I have, right now we can only drive one per person, but a few gallons of water in each vehicle. Eye rinse, so that's, if you got contamination in your eye, and paper towels. And then another thing you're supposed to have is a change of clothes, which We were originally providing like a Tyvek suit, which is what you put on to apply pesticides. But then I started thinking about college students and how likely they are to say, I'm concerned about pesticide exposure, so I'm going to go put on this plastic suit. And I'm thinking that that's very unlikely, and that even if they were concerned, they might not want to put on the plastic suit. So we switched last year to sweatpants and t-shirts. So I just bought some extra large sweatpants and t-shirts that are a more comfortable option for if you're really concerned about like having contamination on your clothes. I think it's more likely that someone would jump to being comfortable putting that on than the Tyvek suits. So that was another change that we made recently.
Yeah, we dealt with that by asking students to have always a change of clothes in their bag and just have it on them all the time. Ariana, go ahead.
Yeah, when we go to the field, at least I always had like a big bag of things I possibly could use. I had a raincoat, I had extra pants, I had extra socks. I just went the full thing. But I know you said extra water. I remember we had like big gallons of water in our thing, and when we put them in there, they weren't secured. So by the time we got to the field site, all of the water just like flooded our trunk, and it was a good time.
I'm sure that was fun to clean up.
And I have a question about, so we talked about providing protection from rain. What do we think about like a hat for working outside? Is that part of your kit?
So in the past, we haven't had hats included, and we just recommended if that it was a good way to keep the sun off your face. But we are planning to incorporate hats now as that are MSU hats as a way to have people signify that they're an official researcher working for the university. So it's kind of something included that's a safety and comfort issue of wanting to make sure that people knew you were official and allowed to be where you were doing whatever weird research activity you're doing in the field that might look odd to passerby. And so I think MSU hats are a good addition. They're easy to find and are, you're an MSU vehicle with MSU hat, something that just makes it look obvious that you're an employee doing a job.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I remember when I was just an undergrad doing stuff over the summer, we have a university vehicle which has those stickers on the windows that say like Michigan State University, but it was hot, so the windows were rolled down. So there was just this minivan on the side of the road, and this couple pulled over and they were like, "You are on our son's farm. What are you doing here?" And I think it definitely would have been helpful to have more things, because I was just carrying traps, and I was like, "Oh, I'm not stealing cherries. I'm just checking the bugs that were here." And they were like, "Well, we don't want you stealing any cherries." And I was like, "You can check the car. We didn't steal any, I promise." So
You're just taking bugs.
Yeah, I know Sophia has like magnets she puts on her cars that I think are really helpful, that more labs should incorporate into, and the baseball caps, to make you look like a very official employee that's not there stealing things, that's just doing their job.
And the decals, yeah, like Sophia, the decals you have on your trucks are way bigger than what's provided by the university, which is just those stickers that are just really bumper stickers. So I think the larger decal that says exactly, in a lot more obvious way what the vehicle is, because you're saying vegetable entomology, right?
Yeah, you're not supposed to use MSU because that's a trademarked thing. So I didn't put MSU for that reason on those, because I didn't want to have to go through the approval, but it just says vegetable entomology on and it's not a decal, because that's a point of contention. If you're renting vehicles, you can't like put a sticker on rented vehicles. So I specifically bought these as magnets, and so you can just slap them onto the car, take them off at the end of the season. If you remember, unfortunately, I don't think I have any more left, because we keep returning the cards with the magnets on them, and I never get them back. So I need to get new ones. But I would recommend that, because you're right that the window stickers are so dark. The writing is like there's no contrast with the background, that I don't think it's visible for many people. So we've been in situations like what Ariana is describing. So maybe this is a good time to talk a little bit about some of the changes that are sort of coming along the pipeline, and that you have implemented. And the reason why we're talking about it is partly because you had just, like, we released in a department this newer version of the field guide that is more sensitive to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So maybe Jackie, talk about how that came to be. Like, how did that happen in the lab? What precipitated these changes?
Sure. So what happened was during all the racial justice activity this summer, our lab made an effort to set time aside during our lab meetings to have conversations about how we can do better as a lab, as a department, as a university at addressing issues of systemic racism, or improving our DEI initiatives, diversity, equity, inclusion. And so I came across this article that was published in Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. It's by Demery and Pipkin, and it's called Safe Fieldwork Strategies for At-Risk Individuals, Their Supervisors, and Institutions. And so I brought this to a lab meeting, this paper, and we discussed it. And I think it was really eye-opening, especially from my perspective as the kind of person who's responsible for safety and training in the lab. And I had never thought about safety or safety training through this lens of how different individuals might have different risks associated with fieldwork, and how we can kind of accommodate those needs of people that might be at different risk levels. So I was inspired by their list of recommendations for things that labs or supervisors can do to help people be more comfortable and safer in the field. And that was kind of coupled with a long-going conversation over the last couple of years of how we needed a field guide, and how a lot of our field safety training was very informal and all that. And so we had already been wanting to have a basic field safety guide. And then this paper that came out kind of lit the fire to get it rolling, because I really wanted to formally incorporate this safe fieldwork strategies for all messaging, because I felt like it was really important to address and was something that hadn't been being addressed. So that was kind of the inspiration for it. And so I definitely have to give that paper a lot of credit, because so many of the tips and strategies that we incorporated into this field safety document came directly from that paper.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to link to that in the show notes so people can see that. So why don't we go through some of these points that were made in this paper that you actually ended up incorporating into your field guide. And some of it is, I guess, just better communication, right? So just talking about it from the perspective of the lab, and also for individuals that if you are concerned going to the field, if you have any hesitations, bring it up and talk to your supervisor or talk to somebody in the lab that you feel comfortable talking to about it, so that it can be addressed, right?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest messages I took away from their paper, and what I tried to put into this document is making space to have the conversations, and making that clear that it's an open, safe place to discuss your concerns and have this like difficult conversation from the get-go. When you hire somebody, that they should know that they're allowed to bring their concerns, and that we want to make sure everyone's safe and avoiding these problems. So it's kind of like trying to get ahead of it and making a safe place to talk about these things, which is really important.
Yeah, and then to continue on this communication topic further, the other point, some of the other points covered how you should communicate with the people in the field, right? So if you're going to visit a field site, probably the farmer knows about the fact that you're visiting the field site, but does the neighbor know? And so we have run into that issue too, where the neighbor got a little bit unhappy about our driving into the farm, the road was like passing in front of their house. So it's not just the immediate owners of the piece of land that you're visiting, but also who are around that land that you're supposed to be communicating with, right?
Definitely. Yeah. And that is a challenge, in these rural areas where the houses are spaced out, or you've got these kind of back roads and you don't always know the best way to contact people. Do you have ways that you alert neighbors or connect with them? Because we haven't really found a strategy for that.
I mean, one thing that I have done is I asked the farmer, as we're like developing the plan for how we're going to visit the farm and what we need to do. Like, so there are some farmers that want us to check in their, home farm or whatever. There are farmers that want us to wear particular protective gear when we enter their farm. And then there are others that are like, yeah, just come in whenever, and then there are others that are, yeah, please text me before you come here. So there's like a whole range of requirements of how farmers want us to communicate with them. And then part of establishing that protocol is also like, is there anybody around your vicinity, or is the driveway that we're going to be accessing the field, is that a shared driveway, or is there anybody that we should be concerned about, or contacting them ahead of time before we start doing that? And sometimes, it just comes down to like, you don't know these things, and all of a sudden there's a person wanting to like know what it is that you're doing, right? Because they see you pulled over on the side of the road. So there's that too that we have to deal with. And I think that one of the things that one of the suggestions, I guess, was that you have um, really good identification, not just the things that we talked about just now, but also like have a letter from your supervisor with you at all times that explains that you're a legitimate employee of MSU, that you can show to the police or whoever may be questioning your legitimate visit of a particular field, right?
Yeah, definitely. And that kind of came up about like with COVID restrictions this past summer when I was developing this document. At the same time, we had these travel authorizations and these kind of formal letters that were somewhat forced upon us because of being like getting approval to work with the COVID restrictions. But it did prompt that idea in my head of, it's kind of nice to have some documentation from a university official or from your supervisor to have with you in case somebody was questioning what you were doing, to have this kind of formal letterhead with details of your plan. So I definitely really like that idea, and we'll try to be doing that in our post-COVID world too, not just as it relates to that. But I also always recommend my students keep their MSU IDs on them as well, to prove like I'm associated with the university.
So I want to talk a little bit more about how we prepare for a field season. So I have a little show and tell for those of you that are watching this over on YouTube. We had also a lab meeting, what Jackie was talking about, with a conversation about how we're going to prepare for the field season. So one of the recommendations in this paper is to have high visibility clothing so that people can see you from far away, and that also engenders some trust perhaps in people, that you're not trying to hide yourself in the field. So I looked around at MSU what we have available, and I had conversations with MSU University stores, but then I ended up working with MSU linen services. And so if you're interested, you can purchase high visibility vests like this one. This is a one size fits all mesh, as you can see through it. It's a light material that you can wear in the field. And MSU Linen Services will embroider them for you. I was not able to find anything that already says MSU on it. So it's apparently not possible to purchase a high-vis vest on campus that already says that, but they will put on a little tag that says MSU. This is the largest size that I was able to get. So it's a couple inches tall sign on it, or tag on it, but it's better than nothing. And so it's light material, it's one size fits all, and the whole thing I think is a little under $10 per vest with the embroidery on it. So if you're interested in purchasing that I suggest you look up the MSU Linen Services. So maybe we can talk, Jackie, about how you guys, and maybe Ariana, you can chime in how you guys are preparing for your field season.
Yeah, so we talked about how I totally want to get magnets for our vehicles. I think that getting magnets for the trucks and getting some of those more MSU official safety gears is really important. We put together, so I'm also just making sure that the safety totes and all the vehicles are fully stocked with all those items we discussed earlier. First aid kits are fully stocked. I like to put baby wipes in those because we have sticky traps. So those are good for cleaning off your hands when you're handling glue traps. So just making sure that the vehicles are all stocked. We also had to lease more vehicles from MSU Motor Pools. So we have some trucks that the lab owns, but with the number of projects, the number of people that we likely have, we always have to lease vehicles for the summer season, but that's even more exaggerated by the COVID restrictions where we currently have to drive alone. So lots of vehicles having to be rented, and then making sure those vehicles are stocked with sanitizing solutions to be able to sanitize the vehicles after somebody drives it so that someone else can safely get in it afterward. So that's kind of an added thing. And we're preparing, we want to go through this field safety document with all of our employees that we hire. One thing about driving separately to field sites is we miss a lot of the chance to explain our research, explain what to expect in the field. So that was something I noticed a lot last year with driving separately. Like, so much of our training happened informally in the 2-hour drive to a blueberry field, where I was explaining exactly what we were studying, why we were studying it, how we were going to answer research questions with the data that we were collecting, as well as answering questions about field safety and stuff. And those conversations were a lot harder to have when we weren't in the cars together. So we're definitely trying to set aside time at the start of field season to not only go through field safety, but also explain the goals of the lab and like the research and stuff like that. Because I think students are better able to succeed in the summertime when they understand the work that they're doing. And that's something I'm definitely putting time into when I train students when they first start.
What's your guys' policy on masks?
Yeah, so masks always indoors, masks outside when you can't socially distance. So luckily we're on farms a lot, so we'll wear masks as we unload trucks and get our instructions for the day. And then, we'll try to have someone go to one end of the farm and someone go to the other end of the farm. And in that case, we can take our masks off, which is good for when it's hot in the summertime. It's pretty brutal to wear a mask outside all day. So, while we're together outdoors, masks, and then in the lab always, of course. And we do have to have 3 people only per lab space. So that's challenging with a larger lab with a lot of people. So we have to do a lot of pre-planning every week for who's going to be in at what times and what day. And as you can understand, anybody that does research knows that plans change, they change quickly. And so I've put a lot of work into having like Google spreadsheets with calendars where when people have to change their schedules, everybody can see it or can ask questions, we have a chat or email thread to plan for the week as anything changes. So the logistics planning and having to cooperate with one another was a huge need last year. We actually did quite a bit of research for the COVID restrictions, and it required a huge team effort to work together, to not overlap too many people in the lab, to plan ahead, which is a challenge. And so I'm hoping this year, because we've already worked out some of the kinks, that we'll be able to do that even more smoothly. But the spacing out indoors and not driving together was definitely super, super challenging.
Ariana?
Yeah, I would say so. For my field season, all of my sites are on MSU's campus, just like in the dairy farm or the plant path farm. So there I don't really have people questioning me just because we're on campus. People are used to us just running around in the fields doing things. But if I ever left again, like went to Fenville or anywhere, I would definitely want like those vests you showed and like an MSU hat. I think will really help because like Jackie said in the beginning, I had never thought of safety in that lens just from my privileged like point of where I am. So I think this field guide is going to be great and it's going to be super beneficial for everyone in our department.
Sorry, to get back to the mask for a minute, is mask something that your guys' lab provides for people?
Yeah, so at the start of the summer last year, when we had new students starting, well, really for everyone in the lab, I did buy cloth face coverings. I didn't get the MSU ones. It was just like cheap ones from Amazon that I provided. And some people used them and some people used their own masks. But I did make sure that everybody had a cloth mask provided when we started up again with in-person work. And then I always had a box of disposable ones in case someone forgot their mask for a day, which happened, you know, it happens.
Mm-hmm.
We've all been there. And now we have disposable masks available if people want to double mask, which is the current recommendation. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say Matt, I'm in Matt Greshup's lab, the organic pest management. His wife was making masks and donating them to a bunch of places. So last year at the beginning, yeah, she made a bunch of masks for everyone. So we had those. And like Jackie said, people use their own as well. Yeah.
Kelsey Graham, I have to give her a shout out because she made a ton of bee masks for people in our lab. So we all had matching bee masks, which was awesome. I think she got a pattern from somebody and donated a bunch. And yeah, they were all really cute bee fabric. So we were on brand.
That's perfect. Yeah, I appreciated Amanda's masks since they were like a tie behind your head. So you didn't actually have like the pressure on your ears, which was great it's fine. I think that's my only issue is like just after a long day, it's always my left ear that just like feels the pressure.
Yeah, especially if you're wearing glasses or have some other things already on your ear. I think it gets pretty busy back there.
Yeah.
It's funny now that like we've been in this for a year and we've been wearing masks for a long time. I'm so picky about masks now. I need to have the band so that my glasses don't fog up. And so, you know, I'm like a little bit of a mask diva. But it was life-changing when I discovered that the anti-fog masks. I was like, oh, this is a game changer. I need this. Yeah.
People without glasses are really living their best lives during this pandemic. It's not fair. I remember I took immature taxonomy in the fall and we went on like a night collecting trip with just 3 of us so that we could like space out. And a student that never wore glasses before, we had to wear, he was trying this like blue light thing. So we had to wear yellow goggles for it. And he was like, how do you people wear masks when you have glasses on? And I was like, well, welcome to the struggle. So.
Definitely. And the summer humid too. It was like, oh, I'd get out of the truck and put my mask on and it would be just instantly fog. So
yep.
So I have maybe one last question. You also have kind of on the last page here, Jackie added a bunch of like resources that people can use if they have questions or if it's a safety issue or things like that. And I wondered if you so this document is obviously not something that people would take with them to the field, or is it? Because sometimes you need it right with you. So is there like a miniature version card or some way that like do they take a picture of this, or how does this information get into their phone, I guess is what I'm.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I hadn't thought about putting the entire guide as something that they would carry or that was in the vehicle, but perhaps that's a good idea. But we do have in our travel totes, like our safety totes in our vehicles, typically it's a list of medical facilities because, you know, we go to certain regions of the state where they might not know where the nearest hospital is or, you know, those sorts of things. So we always have a list of nearby medical facilities for emergencies. But I could see a real good use to have some of these other resources also included in that safety tote,
Yeah,
or just
we used to have we just would print out with like smaller than usual letters a list of like the people in the lab and their phone numbers.
Mhm.
And then with packaging tape, we sort of laminated it and we would give one of those to everybody. And then over time, we started adding more and more of these like, you know, non-emergency phone numbers that you might need. So then it would have like phone numbers on both sides instead of just phone numbers on one side. But that was a way for us to like not have to like go to Kinko's or somewhere, but just do it in house.
That's a great point too about making sure that lab members have each other's numbers. And so we do have that in our mile logs. You know, you have the mile log folders for keeping track. We always have a lab contact sheet in there, but that would be a great place for these other numbers to live as well.
Do you require new students that come on to, for example, save your phone number in their phone, or how do you deal with that?
They don't have a choice because I'm texting them all the time. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of communication through text. So I definitely give my phone number when they first start, and we do a lot of communication through text. So they have it, whether or not they want it. They're going to
And
be hearing
has
from.
has that ever been a problem? Because I've had undergraduates that didn't have like a big data plan, and they were a little bit concerned about the data.
So I've never had that come up. I have had it come up and I haven't had it come up as far as communication. Like nobody's ever complained that like I text them too much, but I have had students concerned about using GPS on their phone to navigate to field sites. So we do have some GPS units that people can use. And then we always have printed out maps, and you never go to a field site on your own before you've been taken there by somebody, which that's for a lot of reasons, but that's, you know, some safety concerns, but also being able to navigate and know what you're doing once you get there. So we have GPS units, and I always have printed out maps, but that's the biggest concern I get about cell phone data is GPS.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how we kind of require almost everybody to have cell phones and use it for work, and that to me is a gray area that I don't have a very good solution to how to bridge at this point in time.
Yeah, it's definitely something that could easily become an issue for somebody. And beyond having a GPS unit, I think um, it's it's a safety, like I mentioned in the safety document, like have your phone charged so that you're able to call. But certainly if a student didn't have that available, we'd have to come up with another solution. So
Yeah. We take it for granted in this day and age that you can be reached by text messages and you have your phone with you at all times, I think.
definitely.
Yeah, say we would definitely have like chargers for our phones in the like there would just be like a universal lab charger that's went between field trucks if you ever went anywhere. So I think that's a good thing to include as well.
Yeah, we did have last year with COVID, with driving separately, we would typically driving separately, but there was at least 2 trucks going to any site. You know, we try not to have people working alone whenever we can avoid it. So even though you were driving separately, there was a little fleet of MSU vehicles driving to the same site. And we got walkie-talkies to be able to say, hey, like I missed the turn, I'm going here. Or when we got to the field site, hey, remember to put on 4-wheel drive or whatever. So the walkie-talkies were great. And the students all had insect code names that they like to use on the walkie-talkies. So it ended up being kind of fun. Obviously that only works within close range, but it is one way to kind of low tech communicate without a data plan.
Cool. So anything that we missed, Jackie, that you wanted to bring up in relation to this document that you prepared?
I guess I just want to invite people from the department, or I mean, maybe others who may be listening, if they look at this document and see something that I missed or that could be expanded on, or have other resources that should be included, like I totally intend for this to be somewhat of a living document that can be improved on and added to as needed. So I appreciate feedback that people have, and I hope it's useful for anyone going to the field this summer to get people safe as they can be.
And so this will also be uploaded to the department's website. So we'll link to that in the show notes as well for anybody if they wanted to look it up. And yeah, and also it will be on the website. So a couple of different ways to find it. And I guess the intention is for people to take it as a guide, just a suggestion for how different people are dealing with the upcoming field season. So it's not an obligation, but a source for ideas of how some of us are dealing with this situation that we're all in. So any last questions, Ariana?
Nope. I just want to thank Jackie again, because I think this is something our department really needed. We have some like over-prepared labs, and other labs, you know, I think it's just going to be beneficial to everyone that will have access to it. So
thank you.
Yeah, it's a great addition and long overdue, I think. So thanks for jumping in and spending how much time did it take, by the way, to put it all together?
Gosh, I wish I would have, kept track, because it was kind of something that I worked on as my productive procrastination if I was avoiding other projects. But I looked at some other like university stuff for inspiration. I used the Demery and Pipkin article. I used the ACLU website for tips on talking to the police, which we didn't mention, but there's some tips about if you got pulled over and safety tips for dealing with the police. So, I mean, I worked on it over a few months, but it was, little chunks here and there as I pulled together resources and got feedback from people in my lab and outside of the lab. So I do appreciate everybody that contributed and gave me feedback along the way, because that was super helpful.
And I guess along those lines of feedback, we are very open to people chatting with us over social media. Ariana is our Instagram account manager, and Jen is our Twitter account manager. So feel free to chime in on the conversation there when the message goes out about the episode.
Yeah, and Jackie, if you want to plug your Insta and Twitter handles, if you want, no pressure, you don't have to. But
I'm not a science social media expert. I do run the lab website, so you can check out our Isaac's Lab website, which I am responsible for, and I'm currently building another website for a new project that we have, SCRI project. So I'm much more like webmaster than social media expert. I have technically responsibility over the lab Twitter, but Rufus is like way more active on his personal Twitter and like sharing science related things. And I am like a total Twitter noob. I don't know anything about it. So I don't post on the lab one very much. There's a lab Instagram though that I do post on that is, oh gosh, what's it called?
I think it's MSU Berry Bugs.
That is it, MSU Berry Bugs. So follow that on Instagram if you want to see fun stuff that the lab is up to.
And also, is that the same account on Twitter, MSU Berry Bugs, I think, right?
So I think it's Isaac's Lab on Twitter, at Isaac's Lab.
Okay, well, we'll figure that out and put it in the show notes as well for everybody if they want to look up how the Isaac's Lab is doing.
Yes, it's at Isaac's Lab. Isaac's Lab at MSU. Yeah, that's our lab Twitter. But Rufus's Twitter is a lot more fun. So
cool. Well, thanks again, Jackie, for joining us today. This was, I think, really helpful. And if you make any of these in the future, we'll have you back again and chat more about it.
Thanks so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
All right. And thanks everyone for listening in. We'll talk to you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.